This is the fourth small group discussion with J. Krishnamurti at Brockwood Park, 1973.
What should we talk over together?
Would it be possible to talk about meditation at all? Because one or two nice people asked me, had I ever meditated before after sitting in your library for 10 minutes? And my friends in Scotland, the yogas, have started special sessions of half an hour sitting quietly, which they call meditation. And I wondered whether that is meditation or whether it's part of meditation.
Should we talk about meditation? Do you want to talk about it? Do you really want to talk about it seriously? Would you call sitting quietly meditation? Would you call meditation sitting in front of a picture and trying to concentrate on that picture? Is that meditation? Or take a phrase out of a religious book and meditate on that. Think about it, see the implications of it, and try to see if you can live that, what you have understood out of that phrase or out of that sentence, and carry it out in daily life. Would that be meditation? Or follow somebody, a system somebody has put together because you think he knows, and because you don't know, you're practicing so that you will know what he knows. Would you call that meditation? I've seen every kind of meditation practice on earth, including the Zen. You know what Zen meditation is? Where is Ted? He will tell you about it. He's practiced a great deal for 7 years. The implication of what Zen meditation means. The word Zen comes from the word Sanskrit, dhyanam, which means meditation. And as the Chinese couldn't pronounce dhya, they turned it to Z and became Zen. And they practice sitting very quietly. See how long you can be absolutely still. And put you questions that have no answer, but you have to find an answer. They practice attention, awareness, and so on. And there is the Christian practice of contemplation, in certain monasteries, and so on. In India, there are dozens of different kinds of meditations, meditative groups, classes, and so on. Now, when you look at all that, is that meditation? You don't know what it is. So perhaps we can begin to examine why religions throughout the world have talked about the necessity of meditation. Right? Interested in it? They said, because I happen to have talked to many gurus, they come to see me, I don't know why, probably think I'm a super nut like them. They come to discuss with me. They say, what do you think is meditation? And they have practiced meditation for years. I used to know a man. He was judge of a high court. And one morning he woke up and he said, I'm passing judgment on people all the time. I don't know what truth is. And so he called his family and he said, I'm going to withdraw from the world and find out what truth is. Because I've come to a point when I can't pass judgments on people without knowing what truth is. And it is in India, it's still possible to go from village to village and be fed and clothed and looked after if you take the religious garb. So he came one day, came to see me, and he said, I've been practicing meditation for 25 years. You understand? It wasn't a game with him. It was 25 years he practiced. And he said, what you say is true, because what I've found in all these years of solitude, control, sitting quietly, going into myself, after all these years I have found that I have mesmerized myself, that I have been caught in some form of vision which I have unconsciously or consciously created, and that's what I call meditation. Because he came to one of the talks where the speaker was talking about meditation and what's implied and so on. So there you are. There are so many kinds of meditation. And they all endeavor, as far as I understand, that you should have a very quiet mind. Because it's only a very quiet mind that can see or experience reality. That's what they all say, that a still mind can reflect as a quiet pool reflects the trees or the evening stars. So quiet mind is necessary so that it experiences or the reflection of that something which man has thought can come upon it. That is the basic idea, as far as I know, of all meditation, right? Control, sit absolutely quiet so that your body is still, without any movement, and your mind also be very still. And they say you can achieve this through certain forms of yoga. May I go? You like all this? Through certain forms of yoga, certain disciplines, and a correct form of breathing, so that your mind, through exercise of control, guidance, a directive purpose, can receive or experience that which is called truth. That is the basic idea, isn't it, of Zen, the Hindu practice, and perhaps in the Western world also. There are several things implied in it. Control, thought must be controlled. Thought must not chatter. Thought must not deceive itself. It must lead a very religious life, a life where you do not hurt, kill, there must be no pride, and so on and on. All that is necessary. Right? So let's examine it. Let's talk about it. You understand? When you have a quiet mind, you can see things clearly, right? When your mind isn't chattering all the time, you can hear much more. You can see much more. That seems so obvious, isn't it? And how do you bring about such a quiet mind in which you can really listen, not only to the promptings of your own thoughts, conscious or unconscious, but also listen to the silence itself. And to do that, the ancients have said, thought must be absolutely be controlled. Because it's the very nature of thought to chatter. It's the very nature of thought to go from one association to another association. So it's endless chain in which thought is caught. Have you? So they say, control your thought. And they have spent years in controlling their thought. Because thought is not so easily controllable. Right? And they have said, some of them, that the controller is the higher self. Are you following all this? Is that the higher self, the soul? The Hindus have certain words, Atman and so on, so on. So the controller is the entity that in meditation operates by controlling the vagrant, chattering, meandering thoughts. Right now. That's the first question. Now, who is the... Now we are going to investigate the thing together. That's what they have all said, more or less, in various forms. Sit quietly, breathe quietly, in a certain way, control your thought. Right? So, one has to go into the question of what is thinking, what is thought, and who is the controller. You understand? Unless we solve that problem, fundamentally, the real quietness of the mind is mechanically brought about. You understand that? So I'm to find out whether it is possible to have a quiet mind without the controller. Because where there is control, there is suppression. There is conformity. There is the controlled and the controller, the conflict between the two. One is always trying to win over the other. All right? I'm talking, sorry, I've come join, we'll join together later. So that has to be solved. Who is the controller? And what is the controlled? What is thought? And what is the nature of the movement of thought in which time doesn't come into it at all? We'll go into it. Who is the controller? You understand? I'm sure you have heard all our civilization is based on the control yourself. Sit straight. Don't do this, do that. This is wrong, that's wrong. Follow? Right. Follow. Obey. Control. Now, who is the controller? So let's talk about it. Who is the controller? And why is there this division between the controlled and the controller? Unless you really understand this, not verbally, but, deeply understand this, meditation what to me is real meditation cannot take place. You can play with it, you can mesmerize yourself, you can control, you can have visions, you can do all kinds of stuff. But that's not the real thing, at least for me. So unless we go into this very, very deeply and find out who is the controller and the controlled, why this division takes place, and can thought be ever made still? You understand? Also, this is the basic issue. At least, I think it is the basic. I feel that is the basic issue. Because I have sat my youth with those people who meditated. Group of people, very serious, and control. Don't move your body. Sit still. Sit still so that your very eyes are still. You understand all this? Never a single movement. Doesn't matter if your fly comes and sits at the end of your nose, don't move. I don't think you know all this. This terrific discipline that takes place. And I've also sat with those who practice various systems. Self-denial, celibacy, no sex, fasting, 1 meal a day, never look at anything, because that might be a distraction. You understand all this? So, if you really want to go into this question of meditation, and I think it is important to go into it because perhaps that in that meditation something totally different may happen. That's my personal, which has nothing to do with in discussing this thing. So, one has to find out for oneself who is the thinker, who is the controller. Go on, sir. And is the controller different from the controlled? Look, I'm proud. One is proud. And is that pride different from the entity who says, I am proud? You understand my question? Let's talk it over, sirs. You're angry or jealous or whatever it is. Is your jealousy, anger different from the thought which says, I am not jealous, therefore I can control jealousy. You- Please, sir, this isn't one man's dialogue. It's a dialogue which means talking over together.
It seems on this point of who is the controller and what is controlled, in looking at that, we're looking at a series of thoughts, if you're looking at it in yourself, going from whatever caused something like anger to leading to wanting to change it.
Do you consider, have you looked into this question, whether the thought, whether the controller is different from the controlled? If there is a difference, if the controller is different from the controlled, then the controller can perhaps operate on the controlled. But is the controller different from the controlled? And why does the division exist between the two? Until you answer that, you can invent lots of practices, lots of attitudes and opinions and beliefs and following. You haven't solved the basic issue.
We can have different ideas at the same time. Perhaps they're just ideas.
Yes, madam, but you see, no. Is anger different from the entity who says, I must control anger, or rationalize anger, or justify anger?
Well, at first sight, when one begins, they look quite different because it seems there's somebody in the back who is trying to control the thing in the front.
Yes, control. That's right, sir.
And
the engine is in front and you're sitting at the back and control it.
Perhaps this could be approached slightly differently. I have a brain. This brain is not the product of any of the machinations I call my thoughts. This brain has come into being, as far as I'm concerned, without any contribution on my part whatsoever. This brain is composed of cells, and those cells vibrate. As those cells vibrate, they obviously send energy out, which I assume is reflected back to me. So we have two things here. We have a reflection back to me, and we have something, so to speak, inside, which is building the thing which is vibrating. So, as I understand it, the vibrations and the reflections produce out there what I call my thoughts, or my emotions, or my sense perceptions. And these take control over the brain, when the real control of the brain should be coming from some part I don't know anything about.
Is the brain, sir, different from its content? Not the cells, not the structure, but the memories, the associations, the remembrances, the accumulated knowledge, the experience, and so on. That's all there. Is the content of the brain, or the content of consciousness, is the content different from consciousness? or the content is consciousness. Sorry, is this a little bit too abstract or too highbrow?
It's outside ourselves.
No, sir. This has got to be tackled. You and I, we have brains. I'm not a brain specialist. We have brains. It has evolved through millions of years. It contains memories, obviously, which is the result of experience, not only my present day experience, but the experiences of thousands of years of human living. And the brain contains knowledge. That knowledge is acting all the time. That's a pillar, that's a staircase, that's pink, that's white. This is functioning all the time, consciously or unconsciously.
Is that then the controller?
Wait, we're going to a little bit. Is the controller different from the content of consciousness? Is that controller something outside the content of consciousness? You follow, sir? Or is it a part of consciousness?
Is there any part which is the controller?
Is there any part?
Any particular part which is the controller?
Surely we are the controller.
No, Dr. Bohm asks, is there any particular part of the brain which acts as the controller?
Yeah.
Obviously there is. You can see it.
How do you see it?
Fire is there, you know it burns, and you don't touch it. That is the part, I don't know, please understand, I don't know the structure of the brain. There must be a part of the brain which stores up knowledge which is necessary for self-preservation.
So there's a function.
Yes, a function, yes.
So could we differentiate, or would it be useful, between brain and mind? Because
Gee Willikins.
the brain is the organic, the mind is the things.
No, you see,
couldn't we use brain for the physical organ and mind for what we experience?
to me, sir, it is the whole thing, brain, experience, knowledge, memory, the reactions, the content of consciousness, and which is the mind. The whole of it. The physical responses, the neurological responses, the psychological responses, the responses of memory, the responses of knowledge, and the stored up experience which says do, don't do, must and must not, all that is the mind, in which the brain is included. Now, that is, the whole content of that makes up consciousness. If the content is not there, there is no consciousness. So obvious.
Could you say
The house is the four walls and the roof and the window. Without the window, without the walls, without the pillar, without the staircase, without the floor and the roof, there is no house. In the same way, this content, which is stored up in the brain as knowledge, which receives all the stimulus and responds to all the stimuli, the memories of childhood, the memories which are the racial inheritance, collective responses, and so on, the whole content of all that is consciousness. I don't know if...
Could you say it's the meaning as well as the content that makes up that? Because it's not just the individual, it's the meaning that...
I'm born in India. This body is born in India with certain parents. And it is, the brain is malleable, so young. It can receive impressions and be told what to do, tradition, the everyday custom, all that's impressed on the brain, day after day. Don't kill. That's being an Orthodox Brahmin at that time. It was the constant repetition. Don't kill. Don't kill a fly. If you do, you are hurting. And therefore, next life you will pay for it. So this constant repetition, orthodoxy, tradition, the culture, the conduct, the behavior, all that is being poured into this mind, into this brain, which is the conditioning. Catholic, the Protestant, the Englishman, the German, the Russian with his communistic ideology, tyranny, all that. That is the content of human consciousness. And without that content, there is no consciousness. Therefore, consciousness is its content. I mean, this at least seems so obvious to me. I may be mistaken. I'm ready to be trodden upon, shown that you are mistaken.
This raises a problem. Why, I don't know, one has a notion that consciousness is without form, and yet
that's a concept, you see.
Yes, yes.
That concept is part of your consciousness.
Yes. Therefore creates a problem.
I mean, and it's part of your consciousness. And is the controller, as Dr. Bohm asked, a part of that consciousness, part of that brain which says, be careful, don't do that. Because if you do, you destroy yourself. Don't go near the precipice. If you do, you'll fall over, kill yourself. And therefore there is a part of the brain which says, which is all the time alert, watchful for its self-preservation. And would you call that the controller? That is, don't go near the fire, it burns. Don't touch that snake, it is cobra, it will kill you. Don't go near that, put yourself in front of a bus, and so on. Obviously there is that. Otherwise it can't survive. No, please, we're not entered the field of control at all. We're just inquiring. So there is a part of the brain which functions, operates, which may be the controller, which says, do this, don't do that, for self-preservation, to survive. Right?
So anything which it says that way carries the utmost urgency then, doesn't it?
Yes.
That is, it gives a tremendous force.
Tremendous force, yes, sir. Have you understood what?
There is only one thing that everything that consciousness can think of is part of consciousness. But
Wait, sir. To see that, that's important.
Yeah, there's one thing which seems to be still a point of doubt with me. There is a lively quality in human being which gives life, as it were, to the memory. You say you're living. Is the living entity, the living thing, is it also part of consciousness in the sense that you say I'm living, if I'm dead, the memory ceases to function. Is there some living quality in the human organism which in some way is part of consciousness, but in some way is not part of it?
I understand.
That's the only thing I'm not sure of.
No, before you go into that, we must come to this point. Stick to the one point. We'll come to that presently. Apparently, it's very important for the brain to survive. And to survive, it must guard itself. It must protect itself. It must have complete security so that it can function properly. So, one part of the brain says, be careful, don't move. Don't do this. That is the years and centuries of experiences. Don't go near the precipice. Don't be careful when you touch a snake. And so on, so on. Now, is that the controller? And you follow? Answer that question. Don't go off to something else for the moment. Is that the controller which says, I must control thought?
No.
We are talking of meditation. And I said, most meditations insist on controlling thought in one form or another. And we are asking if the control is part of that brain which says, which has learned and which is a constant warning movement. Warning is telling you all the time, watching. What are you going to say, sir?
Surely there are many different controlling factors. There's the morality which sends a man to war. It tells him it's more important to be...
the man... A man who goes to war, why?
Because his morality,
which is part of my culture.
Terribly strong. It can be strong.
Yes.
Self-preservation.
Yes. Is it?
It
is it?
But it's only one of dozens of...
I understand. Is it? Is it my self-preservation to go out and kill and be killed? Take a chance.
You don't go out with the idea you're going to be killed, though.
What's that?
You don't go out with the idea you're going to be killed.
Of course. But if you don't go out with the idea of not being killed, you're a silly ass. You're going to be killed. Because and it's obvious. No, this is really quite important to answer this question, please.
It seems to me a practical difference. If I nearly run over crossing the road, there's a tremendous speed of movement back onto the pavement, which seems to me different in quality from the kind of image or conditioned part of the mind which says it must control itself because this is the right thing to do.
And so look, the brain's function apparently is to survive, right? Otherwise it cannot function. Survival is absolutely necessary for the brain. And therefore, control is necessary. Bus, train, you follow? Control is necessary. And is that control necessary, which means, is it a form of survival to find truth? I don't know if I'm jumping, am I? Is the discovery or the coming upon truth its complete survival? If it is, then control may not be the factor at all. I don't know if I'm conveying something.
Intelligences.
Don't let's, if you don't mind, sir, introduce a new word. Let's keep to few words that is. I see physical control is necessary. Running away from danger. Running away from any form of hurt, physical hurt. And is the discovery of truth, whatever that may mean for the moment, is that also a form of survival? Am I making myself clear, sir? Or somebody who has understood put it more clearly than I have, if somebody has.
Well, they're saying that the brain, which is discovering truth, is able to survive in a deeper
And in a more harmonious way.
But of course the mind is now conditioned to believe that it's in mental, and it's not only in physical danger, but it's in mental danger.
That's what I want to get at. You understood what? The brain has cultivated memories and responses to physically survive. And added to that, it says, I will survive if I believe that I am an Englishman. So it thinks belief will be a form of survival. Right? And is belief a form of survival at all?
Well, I think people feel that belief gives them the energy that will enable them to survive, you see. They feel without my beliefs I would be lost.
Yes, that is, we think belief will give me the energy to survive, the energy to fight another belief. I am a Hindu and you are a Muslim. My belief, I have the energy in that belief to kill you because you have a different belief. Is that survival?
No, surely that's... we're also conditioned to think that mentally we are in a very dangerous position unless we have the right, well, we can call it belief. And you know, the Christian church persecuted people not because they were quarreling with anybody else, but they said to save this man, just like our doctors do now, we've got to make him believe right, set his whole mind in the correct order of Christianity.
Yes, sir.
Therefore, what I don't quite agree with what Dave said.
What way?
That you said that one's only condition to save, the brain's only condition to save itself physically. I think it's also very much aware of the danger of
wrong belief,
psychic
yes,
order, wrong psychic order.
Well, I was saying that we are conditioned to believe that we are in danger unless we have a firm belief. That is.
Yes, answer. That without belief, you are in danger.
Faith, maybe.
Faith.
But I don't need faith, because all religions have gone. The faith is only for the ordinary person. You've got to get beyond that to really see it.
So, sir, are you saying that belief is a form of security?
I'm saying that
gives you security.
That one hasn't got security only physically.
No. Of course, we are saying that.
Unless the mind is rightly ordered and functioning rightly, it is not yet secure.
Of course, that is there are physical dangers, and the brain must protect itself against the dangers. And also, it says, beyond the physical, it says psychologically, inwardly, if I have no belief, I should be lost. And does that belief give security? Or, on the contrary, it destroys security? After all, when I call myself a communist, it is an idea. It is a concept which I accept or which has been fostered on me, and I am a communist. That's an idea, as an Englishman, German, Hindu, and all the rest of it. And in that idea, that idea gives me security, because I'm living with the communists. If I'm not a communist and living with that group, I'm in danger. So, belief in any form is a danger.
But understanding is what we want.
Therefore, that's it. Now, I've understood. There is the necessity of physical control, which is part of the brain, which is always watching the staircase, how it goes down the staircase, far. And there is also, it says, I will find security in the communal belief. And that communal belief will obviously be different from another communal belief. And they are at war. And therefore, communal belief is a destructive thing in which the brain has sought security. Now, to see that is security. I don't know. Am I all right, sir? What?
Is it what you said before, that the truth is security? That is that merely to believe something is arbitrary.
Of course.
It's just an idea that you accept, but then the difficulty is that some people, it's very difficult to distinguish sometimes between this belief and the sense of truth, you see.
Belief is well, we won't go into, wait a minute. So, here I am. My mind, the brain has cultivated certain part of itself which is on the constantly on the watch, not to trip over, fall, hurt, not to get poisoned, and so on, so on, so on. And also part of the brain which says, I am a Hindu, Englishman, German, may believe. And living with the Germans, it gives a belief, that belief gives security. And that belief, giving it security, comes into a contact with other set of beliefs, French, and there are teachers of throat. It's obvious. Or religious. I'm a Catholic and you're a Protestant. And we are at it. Because living in a Catholic community, there is great safety in calling myself a Catholic. And you, being a Protestant, great safety, and so on, so on, so on. Does that offer security at all? This division of belief, nationalities, culture, does that give security?
It's an imaginary security,
An
imaginary.
You see, there is no security. You could see it. World War, 2 wars. I believe there have been 5,000 wars after history began. So, see what the mind, what the brain is doing. If physical security is necessary, then brain says, I'm living in this community which believes in certain things, and living together, having this belief, there is safety. See what it has done. And according to that belief, it acts, which is in opposition to the other community with a different belief. The belief gives it energy to fight that community, right? You following all this? So, and it says that. And also it says there is no security really in belief. Therefore it says there must be security in a totally outside agency. God. And that gives a tremendous feeling of safety. And you come along and say, don't be silly, there is no God. Because communists, you follow? And you're disturbing my God, my belief, my security, therefore I'm willing to fight you. Right? So, physical security and psychological security are two different things. There must be physical security. Brain must watch where it's doing, where it's going, how it's walking. If otherwise, danger. The psychological security in which the brain seeks safety, in that there is no safety at all.
Isn't that the thing that apparently needs to be controlled? I mean that this mechanism which is trying to protect your mind is actually the thing that's disturbing the mind, and therefore the thing which you're trying to control.
Control, that's right. What is disturbing must be put away by controlling it. And so, so there it is. And all that is my consciousness and its content. So psychologically, I say I must control my thought in order to find whatever there is to find, which will give me this complete psychological safety. God. You follow? Enlightenment, etc., etc. I wonder if I'm transmitting anything. Are we communicating? See what I have done. I have moved, my brain has moved security from the physical to the psychological, and the psychological security it finds it is not there. Therefore it invents a super security. God, whatever you like to call it, and through meditation, through control, through various practices, is going to get there and be completely secure. I wonder.
I mean, this is quite right, because one doesn't do this for security, for the sake of security. One
No,
doesn't
sir. No, sir.
inquire into meditation.
Of course not. But I must, and the mind, one must understand the fallacy of this. This idea of super safety. There may be a sense of total security, not in the things that thought invents.
That's it. But then one.
Therefore, one must find out how to go beyond the inventions of thought. That to me is meditation. You follow, sir? I'm putting it terribly crudely, but and that's why it's very important to understand the controller. The controller may be the entity who says, be careful, be watchful, be attentive. There is no physical safety because you're going old. You may die by accident. But there may be greater safety other than physical. Therefore, learn or find out what that is. And you can only find out what that is through meditation. You follow the game it's playing? Or through going to church, or accepting certain ideas, and so on. So, is there security in any movement of thought? Sorry to come to that. Thought has invented God, churches, saviors, masters, reincarnation, the higher self, the Atman, the Brahman. It has invented tremendous lot. And is there safety in all the things that thought has put together? If there is not, then what is the function of thought? I mean, please, this is tremendous question. It's kind of waiting for an answer. Can the brain see the truth that there is no safety, no protection, no security in the things that thought, which is part of the brain as memory? Therefore, is there any security in memory and thought? You understand? Till the brain is completely clear of that, you can't go beyond it. So, See, that's why they have said control thought. You follow, sir? They're hoping thereby to enter into something where thought is not. Hoping thereby there will be great, complete assurance. I don't know if...
Yes, but Krishna, there is this other consciousness which is so different from thought that one doesn't even want to think anymore.
Now, what is the nature of that? You see, that's until I am this brain is very clear that there is no safety in any structure which thought has created. Inquiry into the other may be the projection of thought. Therefore, the brain says, I won't move, at least my brain, I won't move till I've understood this. I won't go enter into that. That's speculation. That's no value.
You mean thought will start looking into it to find a way?
No, sir. No, I mean by, I'm sorry. Look, sir, thought has put together heaven, the Saviour, the church, the dialectical truth, the thesis and antithesis of the communist. The whole world, apart from the physical world, is based on the structure of thought. Technology, the science, the art of war.
When you're talking about the constructions of thought and things that thought has invented, there does seem to me to be a danger of confusing thought either as intellect or as spirit. I mean, I think the things we're talking about, some of them can be the creations of intellect and obviously useless, and the others are completely autonomous inventions of the spirit. I think we're lumping everything under thought, and I think there's an enormous difference between spirit and intellect.
So, we're not differentiating or putting away the intellect or the spirit. We're including all that. We are using the intellect now to think clearly, to see how the mind operates. We are using the whatever intellect one has, it is examining. And in that examination, we are not putting anything away. We are saying the spirit may be the product of thought or may not be. God may be God, the word, the beyond the word may be something which is real. And all that is part of our inquiry, in which we are not saying, well, don't deny spirit. I won't deny or accept, we're examining. Because is not the ego, the me, product of thought? My house, my property, my wife, I own that picture, I am better than you or I am not so good as you. I believe in reincarnation and you don't believe in reincarnation. I believe in Brahman, which is a state of mind which is omniscient, omnipresent, and I believe in the nameless Jehovah, and so on, so on, so on, so on. I believe in Marx, and I don't believe in the Bible. All that is obviously the product of thought. All that is thought has put together. The church, the salvation, everything. I can't see.
But thought is a subordinate.
We'll go into that, sir, if you. Is it subordinate?
It's a subordinate functioning or malfunctioning aspect of spirit.
Of search.
Of spirit. Which is not
What is spirit, sir?
I couldn't define that.
Then why do I assume that there is a spirit? This is, sir, look, sir, this is what happens when one goes to India. They assert. They say Gita, the Upanishads, the gurus, the masters have said there is.
But I'm not asserting. I mean, when you breathe, you don't assert fresh air. You just breathe it.
I don't know anything about the spirit. That may be, I'm not patronizing or condemning, that may be part of thought which says, in the belief that there is a spirit, I take shelter. And that may be unreal. The Buddhists repeat every day, I take shelter in the Buddha, in his law, in the way of his truth. Now, the Buddha is their concept what he was. He probably never said, couldn't have said, take shelter in me. Because from everything that one reads about what the Buddha has said, he denied, don't follow me, he said. Don't be childish, grow up. But the mind wants security. So thought may invent the spirit. Therefore, it may be real or it may not be real. But thought must understand the nature of itself and whether thought can ever stop. You follow, sir? Or we are approaching the whole thing wrongly.
From one aspect, aren't you asking us to look at the tricks that thought can play in ourselves?
Of course, obviously, sir. It may be totally wrong idea or concept. I'm not saying it is or it's not. That thought must stop.
What should one's attitude be? Because one is aware that thought does, it's on many different levels and it can be very harmful. And so one does realize one must make certain times in the day when one sits quietly. If you don't make them, they drift away and days go by and you don't.
Yes, I understand.
What is one's attitude?
One's attitude towards...
Thought must be quiet. No, thought must be quiet. But
you see, sir...
one is longing for something else.
No, I'll show. I think it can, first of all, can thought ever stop? You follow me?
It apparently can. It can.
No. I'm not putting it rightly. So the brain is constantly in operation, right? During sleep, during waking hours, it's constantly active.
And also the appetite for thinking.
Of course, it's given appetite, it's active. And can the brain, with all its memories, with all its experience, knowledge and so on, can that brain be still?
Well, at night it can be beautiful.
What?
At night in sleep it can be.
That's
can or cannot be.
Wait, sir. At night, is it still? Or is it active in ordering, in bringing about order in itself, so as to be secure? Is this all getting too much?
Well, isn't it speculative, sir, at that point?
What, sir?
Isn't that point speculative because we're not conscious at the moment it's happening?
I think one can be conscious of it, sir. Look, Mr. Digby pointed out, asked, at night, the brain may be still. Maybe. And is that stillness brought about by the compulsive nature of the culture in which we have lived, which says, be quiet, you follow? Or it is so disturbed during the day, it's relaxed during the sleep and is quiet. There are different quietnesses, different. So I'm just asking, can thought ever come to an end? Or we are looking at it in a wrong way. I'm not saying it is or it is not. Because man has tried different ways to stop thinking. Because he isn't such an ass. He sees very well thought must end sometime. And it ends sometimes with death, but he's frightened of that. Therefore he says, please, I must find out.
Surely thought could be transcended, and in that stage, movement and stillness are one with each other.
Yes, sir, but who is to transcend it? Who is the entity that says, I'm transcending it?
Well, that question wouldn't arise if it succeeded.
What do you mean, sir?
I can't explain it any better than that.
Why should thought come to an end?
We recognize what thought is doing.
Who is saying it should end?
Thought.
No. Yes, sir, but you see, the ending of something is the beginning of something else. The ending is the beginning. But the ending of thought, does it bring a beginning? I don't know if I'm trying.
And if we had something better to do.
No, not better or good.
Can I ask you?
No, please, not art.
You said that thought seems to deal with two things: the content of itself, and then you said also that thought tries to order itself. And I can see that.
No, I didn't say thought orders itself.
Well, perhaps I misunderstood.
The brain needs order.
Yes.
Otherwise it can't function.
Yes. Are you saying then that the order of the brain is not thought?
No, madam. No. I'm saying, look, I'm
sorry,
Mr. Digby brought in this question. He said the brain is quiet during the night.
Yes.
And I said, is that so? It may be quiet because it's weary.
Yes.
It has had an awful day.
It's just knocked out.
Knocked out, and said, for God's sake, I must rest. Yes. Or it has put an order, brought about order during the day in itself, yes, by being aware of and doing the true things, not illusion and so on. Therefore, by bringing about order out of disorder during day, then the brain says, it's quiet then, natural. It's then.
That somehow seems to me a key in what you're asking.
That's what I'm slowly coming. So, I want to find out. Thought, we have said, must come to an end, because one sees the structure of thought and what it has done in the world, both beneficial and destructive. The high degree of technology, and thought uses it to kill, to destroy. You follow? The earth, the people, the monstrous things they are doing. So, we say thought is very destructive. It has its beneficial side, but otherwise thought is deadly. And therefore it must stop. And control, all the rest of it comes with it. I said this may be a totally wrong approach to this problem. So I want to find out why thought should come to an end. I know why it should come to an end, because it's destructive in one sense and constructive in the other. But can the brain, which is so active, which is alive, which is moving, which is all the time observing, consciously, unconsciously, storing up every impression, every memory, every incident, can that active brain be still? You follow, sir? If that brain is still, then thought is not made still. I don't know if am I?
When you emphasize the brain, are you saying that physically the brain is in harmony or still? And then that necessarily means that there's no thought.
Yes, that's right.
Rather than taking it the other way.
Other way, that's right.
Which is impossible.
Yes, that's what I feel. Where there is harmony of the whole.
You mean all the physically are in harmony?
Yes, physically, psychologically, and inwardly out. The brain then is quiet.
And then what you say non-harmony is thought then?
That's right, sir. Sorry, I didn't want to put it so brutally because you wouldn't accept it.
I mean, except for the thought which is necessary.
Yes, that's right. Except thought which is necessary. Thought is disharmony. And so, can the brain be totally inactive? You understand, in the right sense, not don't misunderstand it, not going off to sleep and all that absurd stuff, but totally still. Then thought has its, you understand, sir? Am I conveying?
Yes, I see this as a picture, but it's pretty far away.
That's why I said, can the brain be still?
What is it that makes the brain continue and to think?
To think. Look, sir, I see the tree, memory of what kind of tree, the colors, the shape of it, the beauty of it, the depth of it, and it is registered. Then I meet somebody who says you're an ass, and that's registered. And so on and on and on. It's constantly acting and reacting. And to go out for a walk without a single thought.
So instead of trying to bring this disharmony to order by solving the problem in thought, there's another way.
Yes, that's what, yes. That's why I ask, can the brain be still? Observing, but still, without the observer coming into operation. Because the observer has been put together by thought. And therefore, the observer is the past, is time, and so is thought is time.
So seeing without any movement, seeing without any reaction.
Yes, sir. Put it your own. Yeah. And you can only see without, when there is observer is not. And can that ever happen? Can the brain look at itself? Please follow this. Can the brain look at itself and not create the observer? Look at itself, its inanities, and its rationalities. Can it look at itself and observe what is going on without an outside agency or time involved? I don't know if I'm correct. Time in the sense, the past observing. You see, sir, this is real meditation. It's not just a thing you play with for the moment. It requires tremendous attention, tremendous sense of hesitant inquiry. Look, can you observe the way you sit without condemning? Listen to it quietly. Without condemning, the condemnation is the observer. The way you are sitting without the observer, and sit relaxed in the right position without direction. Are you getting what I'm talking about?
Do you mean so without selection, of when you refer to sitting in a position, without the mind selecting a position that is right or not right?
Partly, yes.
Okay.
Look, can the brain act without contradiction? Can the brain function non-dualistically, that is the opposite we went into the other day, and therefore in clarity, action. Not in choosing. I'm getting you.
So just now you said that when there is harmony, because the brain is still, thought can function.
Narayan, we said something, just a minute. Thought, we said, apart from the physical, is disharmony.
Yes.
Hmm?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Therefore, harmony is non-thought, except in a certain direction.
Yes.
Right.
Now what I want to ask
You and I are clear on that.
Yes.
Not verbally.
No. Harmony is non-thought.
Sounds awful.
Yeah. I see the relevance of it because there are moments in one's life, however occasional they may be, that the brain seems to be functioning very efficiently and still there's a certain amount of quietness.
Certain amount of?
Quietness.
Yes.
The brain itself at the root.
So what is your question?
Now what I'm saying is, can this harmony be brought about through some kind of
discipline?
No discipline. Education. Is there a way of setting about this business of not inducing harmony but bringing about harmony?
Yes, I understand. You're asking, can this harmony, which is non-thought, I say it very sotto voce, you understand?
But there is one...
Which I say that very, very hesitantly, because we both understand it. Can this harmony, which is non-thought, can education bring this about? Education being the learning. We went in the other day when we had a school meeting here. What is learning? Learning from a book, learning from hearing, learning from seeing. When the three are harmonious, for all that's involved in this, not just hearing, we went into that pretty deeply. Then the three, learning from a book, learning from listening, not listening according to my desire, according to my pleasure, according to my direction, but just listening. And hearing without judgment, without my conditioned responses interfering. That hearing, seeing, learning from book, when there is that total activity goes on in education, all the implications involved, not just one or two superficial remarks about it, then probably it will happen. After all, that's the function of education.
I'm interested in this because it is also connected with the question the doubt I raised. Because if I say I'm alive, what is alive in me is not thought.
No.
Thought seems to give certain...
Wait, others may say it is thought that makes me alive. I am going to have such a good time tonight.
Yes, I see that. But what I'm trying to say is, when you realize that consciousness with its content, and thought, and consciousness make for the content, the question comes, the fact that I'm alive, is it a part of this content?
Obviously. I should think so, I don't know.
There is some difficulty in this because what is it that distinguishes something which is alive from something which is dead?
There is no difference. I don't say my consciousness is dead. I say it's terribly alive.
Yes.
Because I had a very good meal, I'm going to have a good meal tonight, you follow, I'm going to have more money next week and I'm going to enjoy myself. I mean, it's tremendously alive.
Yes. That all that you see as projection of thought, you are beginning to see thought functioning at very, very subtle levels.
Yes.
And thought at those subtle levels is projecting the thinker.
Yes.
Then you see the thinker and thought are not different.
Yes.
Then you come to the question, I am alive. What is it that is alive in me? Obviously it's not.
Energy.
That's right. If it is energy, that energy, what is it? That is it a part of consciousness?
Oh, I see what you're driving at.
Or to a certain extent it is part of consciousness.
Of course.
To a certain extent
it's not.
It is not. So
what?
The dividing line, because it also seems to play some part between being alive and not being alive.
Look, sir, the question really from all this discussion is, can the brain with all its activity, with all its incessant movement of action, interaction, of interrelationship between actions and non-action, can that brain be absolutely be still? Then, if that happens, then thought has no ending. I don't. Do you understand, sir? Then I'm not seeking the ending of thought. Or thought is not seeking the ending of itself. I mean, you can't answer this question. It has to be gone into very, tremendously deeply to see if the brain, which has evolved, which is the result of time, knowledge, experience, which is so tremendously subtle, weighted by time and experience and all that, can that movement of, which is part of energy, can that energy not still? That, you see, I'm discovering something. Can that energy which has created disorder, thought has disharmony and therefore disorder, can that energy function harmoniously so that there is no disorder at any time? I don't know if I'm... And is that energy the Spirit, God, truth? If we say it is, then the Hindus will jump at it and say, yes, my friend, you're back again now into our field. Which is that what we have said right from the beginning. There is in you the Atman, the Brahman. You follow the game they play? So my concern is only not theoretical but factual, which is, can the brain be still? Or is that impossible?
Can I say in a different way what I said last night?
What's that?
Can I say in a different way what I said last night?
Yes, sir.
You had a question last night which began, can you? And I think everybody in the room heard that question. And for each person who heard it, there's one of three answers to a question beginning, can you? One of which is no, one of which is yes, and the other one is I
don't
don't
know.
And
That's right.
That's, well,
if you
each
don't
person can
know,
only give one of those.
if you say no, that's finished.
Yeah.
If you agree, that's also finished. It has no meaning. But if you say, I don't know, I really don't know, after listening to you all this evening, whether my brain can really be quiet. I don't know.
Yeah.
So what shall I do?
What was your last question?
What, sir?
What was your last question before that?
Now he asks, sir, there are 3 ways of looking at all this.
Yes, I know he did, but what did you ask before that?
You asked, can the mind be still?
My question was, can this brain, which is so active, can that brain be quiet? To that question, he said there are only 3 ways to answer it. One is say no, or say yes, or I really don't know. If I don't know, how am I going to find out? You understand? This is an important question, right? Let's tackle it.
Well, when you say, I don't know, you have in fact ceased to draw of all your own, what you think is your own knowledge.
Oh, that I brush all that aside.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say I don't know, I mean I don't know.
Yeah.
Not I'm waiting for an answer.
Nor are you dismissing the question.
Nor am I dismissing the question, quite right. I don't know. But not knowing, how shall I find out? How shall I uncover? How shall I answer that question?
I don't think you can do it on your own.
Huh?
I don't think you can do it on your own, alone.
You can't do it alone, you're saying.
Wait a minute. I don't think I thought of something earlier on, but it's gone.
Take your time, sir. Don't be...
I think that once you've said, I don't know, I know what I feel about this, but I don't know how to say it. It's the only problem.
But it doesn't matter.
Once you've said, I don't know, you actually put aside all the thoughts from which you were drawing what you were saying.
That's right.
So you have in fact done it.
No, we must be clear. When you say, I don't know, are you saying it superficially, or are you saying, after examining very, very carefully and looking, see, really, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know. Which means you are not waiting for an answer. You are not expecting an answer. You are not searching for an answer, because and you say, I don't know, you have no movement in any direction.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Now, are you that way? If that is so, then how will you find out the answer?
I don't think you need to go any further.
Wait. You've stopped yourself, you see? Haven't you?
Yeah.
When you say you can't, you have blocked yourself. Right, so I want to find out whether the brain can be quiet. I really don't know. So what shall I do? No book will tell me, right? No person outside will tell me, because what he'll tell me, he knows already. If he doesn't know, he can't tell me. So I can't look to a book, to a person, or to any authority. So my mind says, I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
What happens when you come to that point, when you say, really, I don't know? What is the state of your mind?
If you really say that, haven't you stepped out of thought? If you really say it.
You understand what she said? When you say, I don't know, thought has come to an end. It's only the man who says, I know or don't know, that is churning in thought. But the man who says, I really don't know, and as it's been pointed out, thought is an abeyance. Now, but what has happened to the mind, the brain or whatever it is, which says, I really don't know. Thought is in abeyance. I can't look to authority to answer this question. No book, no person. So where are you?
I would say you've reached truth.
Beg pardon?
You have reached truth.
What?
You've reached the truth.
What?
Reached truth.
Why? No. We're asking, what is the state of your mind, your brain, that says, I have looked, I have searched, I have asked, I have begged, I have expected, I'm waiting, you follow? And at the end of it says, I really don't know. Look, what has happened there inside?
Quietness.
Is that then meditation?
What has happened, sir?
I haven't got a word for it at all.
What's happened to the question now?
No, question has been put.
And the answer is
Question has been put, unfortunately or fortunately. It has been put. And he says, I can't look for somebody, all that. I'm asking, after the putting the question and explaining the meaning of not knowing, what is the state of your mind, the brain?
The question.
No, sir. When you say, I don't know, you have negated everything else, haven't you? You have negated the movement of thought, haven't you? Huh?
Yeah.
The movement of thought says, I look in the book, I'll ask somebody, guru, you follow all the rest of it, or I'm going to look. I'm going to investigate. I'm going to search around in every corner. And when you say, I don't know, thought is not. Thought itself has. Thought has no answer. Which is thought which has created all these things, the structure. Thought says there is no answer in there. Thought denies all that. And only then it can say, I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
If it is playing with the things which it has made, it can't say, I don't know. So you say, thought has, to the question, can the brain be quiet, still? Thought has answered it by saying, I don't know. I have tried this way, that way, the other way, and there's no door there. Therefore, what happens? I'll be quiet. It is quiet, not I will be quiet. So what takes place? Then you really don't know.
Intelligence comes in.
Maybe I'm asking, sir, what happens in the brain? What has taken place when thought says, I have no answer to your awful question?
Are you free then to?
Bipal, madam?
Are you free then to find out?
You see, are you in that position? Not you, madam, but generally, are you in that position when you say, I really don't know? My church, my community, my activity, my attachments, my all that, they are not. You follow? All that has put aside. It's only then you can say, I really don't know. Through negation, the don't know is a positive state. It's not, I don't know how many miles between here and New York. I don't know, you follow?
Yeah.
The negation of not knowing is the positive of seeing what takes place. I wonder if you see this.
And they're all possibilities.
What, madam?
All possibilities.
No. Look, madam. Thought has created my attachment to my house. Thought has created the pleasure of sex. Thought has created the attachment to my furniture, to my pictures, to my name, to my work, to my success. Thought has built this world of war, peace, right? Thought has done all that. And we said thought is disharmony because its products are disharmonious. So we said thought is disharmony, except in a certain field. And how to bring harmony, I don't know, right? I only know the activities of thought which has brought about disharmony. What is harmony, I don't know, right? Because you have seen what is disharmony and you have negated it. You haven't verbally negated it, you have positively stepped out of it. I may live in this house, but I'm not attached. You follow? I am not caught in the images of pleasure, and so on, so on. There is a break, not verbal break, but actual break.
Yeah. Can I say something?
Yes, sir, you please, anytime.
I think that one of the basic problems is with people, and it was one of my problems too, that when they get to this stage, when they say, I don't know, they think there's something wrong, but they don't know. They don't want to not know.
No, sir.
No.
No. I mean, that's the most positive say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Say, I don't know whether there is God. I don't know whether communism is the right way of life. I don't know whether the capitalist system is the right. You follow? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and the church and all that, I really don't know. Is my mind capable of saying, really, I don't know? You follow? That is the most positive statement which says, I really don't know.
But
see, but from negation, you follow? You are come to this statement when you say, I don't know, which is the most positive.
Yeah.
Then what has happened?
There is an access of unconditioned energy, it would seem, which makes me want to know. I then want to know.
How can... So, who is I who wants to know?
It's a kind of climate that arises. That's why I'm here. I want to know.
We've just now said, sir, thought says, I want to know. And whatever thought wants to know, it will create. I want to know, thought says, I want to know if there is God, right? And thought has created God.
In response to the want.
What?
In response to a wanting.
In response to a wanting, fear, uncertainty, discomfort, the hopeless way of one life, all that. So thought says, I must know. Thought never says, I don't know.
Can I inquire without thought?
Yes, sir. That is, without thought to observe. That is, when you have totally denied everything thought has created. Its belief, its nationalities, its pride, if all that. Totally deny all that. That very denial brings you to that position when you say, I really don't know. That is not a negation. The man who says, I don't know, is the most positive thing. I don't know. What time is it? I don't know. 5:20. No, okay. I think we'll stop, don't you? We said thought is disharmony. When there is harmony, what is there to know? Right? 2 hours is enough, isn't it? Sorry.